All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is the quantity versus quality debate that I think a lot of us hear about. So I think if you're an SDR, which I know Lucien what's that? Oh yeah, you were as well. Yeah. I forgot. It's so long ago at this point. I think we've all had that manager who's like, hey, how many calls did you make today? Right? Is anybody familiar with? Even as a founder, you probably have some targets, right? So I think it was like maybe 3 months ago. There's this huge debate on LinkedIn. Like, is it quantity of activity or is it quality? Quality meaning like, the type is how personalized your email. So we decided to tackle and try to understand like what actually is the true answer. So it's quantity for sure, then quality, which is kind of changed the game because everybody was like, it's either this or that. It's like, Barcelona or Madrid, whatever. What we found is basically you have to build a foundation of quantity, which is really interesting, right? So we analyzed all these data, and we found that if you're able to hit 85 hours of time with customers across calls and emails, you had a very good chance of hitting 98% attainment, so nearly 100. So that's the base. If you build on top of it quality, which is if you can actually keep your talk time between 40 and 50% on conversations and ask more than 15 questions per 30 minutes, you have a chance of hitting 120%. And this is across like 3/4 of data. The interesting thing about this is really hard to do. I think most people, when they go through conversations, like the first call, you ask a lot of questions, right? Second call, less questions. Third call, less questions. You get more data and you're like, all right, let's just close the deal, right? There's a lot of this, like, let's push it through. To maintain this, you have to always be asking questions. Like if you detect anything that might be off, when we talk to a lot of sales leaders, they're like, oh, this to me means that my rep is very good at constantly asking questions, even when they don't think they need to. If they hear something's wrong, they'll ask a question about it and they'll figure out what's going on there before they move on. So that's only maintain this question rate and this talk time. So the first takeaway is as a rep, build a foundation with quantity and then overachieve with quality. And the reason this works is because if you flip it, if you do quality first and then quantity, you have no chance. So this is the right formula. And the second one, and you'll hear this theme over and over again, is like maintain this posture of always doing discovery. The discovery does not end in the beginning. It continues throughout a sales cycle. And what we found over and over again is that the reps who are very good at just constantly being very curious, even when they think things are going well, asking, hey, what will prevent us from signing? What will prevent us from XYZ? Those reps do really well and are able to maintain that quality that we saw. All right, second one. Can I make a suggestion? This is a really interesting talk track. All right, so we did this other study of trying to understand like what it took to book meetings. It's really hard. Cold calls are so hard. So we analyzed the data for the successful cold calls against the unsuccessful cold calls. And here are two big categories that we found that we didn't implement it at Gong, and our numbers went through the roof. So the first thing is we found this talk track. So interesting. Can I make a suggestion? One more time. Thank you. When we talk to reps and leaders about this, they're saying reps who do this, usually they take the lead in conversations. A bad cold call sounds like, once you get to a point, it sounds like, hey, when do you want to meet next? It's you're on your back foot. When you get to a point in the call where you say, hey, can I make a suggestion? Let's meet next Thursday. And why don't you bring your CFO and like that's the kind of conversation that this means you're having. The other thing that we found that used a lot more is the words I've noticed. And what's interesting about I've noticed is you can't say that without doing some research about them, right? And this showed up a lot more. What didn't show up was, hey, you just got a lot of funding. Do you want to talk about buying a tool? Like that was really funny to see funding show up in all the bad conversations. So I've noticed it's really powerful. If you even force yourself just to use it, if you come to the call with a I've noticed statement, you're going to get instant credibility a lot more. This last one, this is tied to this kind of chains together. Top priority for you. So once you say, I've noticed XYZ, hey, is this a top priority for you? Or is another thing a top priority for you? So this kind of like priorities type research is really important for these conversations. Now, what didn't work, and this is actually really interesting for us. So back in 2022, we launched some new like messaging because we became this platform, and we use a lot of like really buzzy conceptual words that don't really mean anything, to be honest. It was like, oh, we're in the platform for like I forgot what it was. It was just bad. And we found out that this was doing really poorly. One, because it took too long to deliver. And the ones that worked were like really tactical things. Like, do you want to close more deals? Do you want to actually have more visibility of your calls? So that's what showed up as other one. And this other one is really interesting. I think a lot of SDRs are traditionally not trained to mention pricing on the first call. And we didn't know how bad it was until we looked at the data. And we found out because our SDRs would just freeze up when they got asked about pricing and they would fumble it. So it was really bad. So we actually changed the talk track where they can actually mention some pricing to get to the next conversation. So this is all done through data. And my team, I'm not in sales. I just look at the data. I go to the team. And this is what shows up. So the takeaway, take the lead, right? If you think about the can I make a suggestion type posture, it means that you are always showing the customer what to do next. You get information, then you recommend. You get information, then you recommend. You don't want to be like, hey, what do you do next? It's their first time buying whatever you're selling. It's not your first time selling it. So I always remember that. Kind of guide the customer. The second one, if you have really buzzy value prop that you're talking where it takes like maybe longer than 30 seconds to deliver, it's not going to work. Imagine you get a cold call and this guy's talking about how great their product is and it takes 30 seconds. It's just not going to work. So, 2 really great tips for booking more meetings.